Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new chapter of Field Trips Always End Terribly by Itslivybear on AO3. This will be chapter 15. Everything is moving very fast, and I am not. Summary: a careful fight and a work study consideration. The very next day, heart lighter than it had been in a while, Izuku had stars in his eyes at the three third years that stepped into the classroom at Aizawa's behest. He recognized the blonde one as the accidental exhibitionist from last year's second year sport festival, and together they made the big three of UA, or the three third years closest to being pros. Talk about exciting! Apparently, they were there to talk about work studies, but between the one who was painfully shy, Amajiki Tamaki, the hyper one who asked enough questions that even Izuku would call it excitable, Hado Nejire, and the exhibitionist himself, trying an awkward call and response, Togata Mirio, the class wasn't really impressed. Tell you what, Togata said. The best way to demonstrate is experience, so how about I fight you all at once? The class immediately jumped and started yelling in surprise. Sure, he was a third year, but there were 20 of them. They had almost all gotten provisional licenses. Surely this guy was joking. But then, Aizawa basically said, "Sure, whatever." And they all changed into gym clothes and headed to the gym to spar him. "This dude is crazy," Hitoshi muttered, "but he must have a plan or skills that can make him this confident." Izuku nodded. "My thought exactly. The other two, his friends, don't seem particularly concerned, and he's carefree. Plus, he's a top dog in school right now. That has to count for something. I say we play it safe until we know exactly what's going on." The other boy raised an eyebrow and smirked. "You've tagged him, right?" "Of course," as soon as he walked into the gym. Hearing this, Jiro stepped closer to them. "Trust Midoriya to have a plan." He chuckled nervously as Togata finished stretching. "All right." He grinned wide, hands on his hips, stance confident and wide. "Come at me." Never one to hesitate. Kirishima leapt at him. Arm hardened, but the boy didn't move, and Kirishima went right through him. The class froze, and in their distraction, Togata disappeared, leaving his clothes behind. "Shit, where'd he go?" Zuko cocked his head. "He's below us? Jiro, watch out!" She immediately threw herself to the side at his exclamation, and was rewarded with not being punched in the gut and a confused third year. Blue eyes locked with Izuku's. "Oh yeah, you must have marked me, huh? So you know where I am? That's pretty handy. Still, if I'm fast enough." He grinned and slipped through the ground again, popping up and slamming a fist into both Zero and Aoyama. "Then you can't warn people." Jiro paled at the state of her two classmates, even as she avoided looking in the direction of the naked boy. "Well, time to get going for those backliners." He slipped back into the ground, and Izuku scrambled to give accurate readings of where he was. Sure, he knew, but he couldn't translate that well into directions people could understand. Not in time for them to dodge Togata, at least. Soon it was Uraraka, Hitoshi, Tokoyami, who had Dark Shadow help him with maneuverability, Kaminari, who was keeping a constant static on his skin to deter Togata from hitting him, and Hizuku himself. 5 students, 3/4 of their number gone in under 2 minutes. Uraraka, how many people can you probably float? If Kami turns off his voltage field for a hot sec, everyone but me and one other. Tokoyami, Can you stay on the ground with Uraraka? The boy nodded solemnly, watching as Itoshi tried to distract the third year with his capture scarf. I can defend myself and our allies, if that is what you desire. Yeah, you and Dark Shadow are going to launch the airborne people at Togata when he comes up. The three people not currently engaged in combat looked at him incredulously, but didn't have time when Itoshi shouted, "Shit! He's grounding again! Izuku!" He nodded. "Uraka!" She quickly tabbed the three of them, and then both she and Tokoyami moved from their spots. Togata popped up, ready to punch Izuku or Kaminari, only to find them gone. He blinked in surprise at the floating students before breaking out in a grin. "Ah, taking to the air to avoid me, huh? Sadly, that just tells me my target." He slipped back under, and they all tensed. "Raka, he's going for you. Tokoyami, are you ready?" The raven-headed boy nodded, and Dark Shadow wrapped around the three boys with a grin. "Kami, as soon as he goes tangible, shock him. He's coming up in 3, 2, 1. Tokoyami and Dark Shadow tossed all three of them at where he was coming up, Uraraka having moved behind him, ducking when they flew overhead, and the blond boy looked surprised. "Toshi!" Izuku looked pointedly at Kaminari, and Hitoshi blinked and nodded. In unison, the two boys yelled, "Taser! 5,000 volts!" Mirio merely slipped through them. "Sorry, but that won't..." His blue eyes went blank, and they all sagged in relief. "Say the following words. I surrender." "I surrender." He blinked, being released from the brainwashing. "Oh, wow! Brainwashing, huh? That's really neat and handy. Totally didn't think you'd get me, but that voice trick? Nice job." Kaminari cheered weakly. "Don't know when you got so in time with me, Shin. It's like only one of us was saying it." The third year hurried to put his gym uniform back on, and Hitoshi snorted. "I pay attention. Mimicking is a fine art that requires this shit down to a science." Uraka let out her last deep breath. "Okay, I'm good now. My weight tolerance has gotten higher, but man, that was so nerve-wracking." Tokoyami nodded, helping the other three up. "An interesting plan, Midoriya. I'm glad we were able to assist in the takedown." He smiled, and they all went to help up the classmates still on the ground, and he winced when he did. "Sorry," he muttered to Jero. "I wasn't fast enough." She shook her head. "You saved me once, and you still ended up beating him." Still, he thought, if only he had been better at articulating the information he was getting. Hado bounded up to him, completely abandoning Togata. Nah, how'd you do that? How'd you know where Mirio was gonna be?" "Oh, he flustered. "I tagged him before so I could tell. My quirk." She grinned and turned back to the boy in question. "Nah, Mirio, he tagged you. That means you're it." She giggled, twirling in the air, and Mirio chuckled as well. "Yeah, I guess I am. Hey, Tamaki?" The other boy just looked at him. "You're it." The other two third years bounded off, and the elfish boy sighed, looking miserable. "No," he whispered. "Come back." "All right," Aizawa drawled. "What have you all learned?" "Third years have way more experience than us," Mina shouted, still clutching her stomach. "Correct. What else?" "Listen to Midoriya," Kaminari offered, and Izuku held his face in his hands, most likely completely red. Aizawa sighed. "Sure. Anything else?" He murmured around his hands, speaking out in trepidation. "Communication and relaying information is important. If you don't know how to relay the information in a timely and understandable way, there's not much use in having the information." Aizawa raised an eyebrow and nodded. I'm sure everyone has something they need to work on then, yes? The class groaned and Bakugo exploded. I'm great at communication. Fuck off. Yeah, Kaminari chuckled. I don't think yelling at people counts as communication. The lightning boy ducked behind Toshi and Izuku, screaming as Bakugo tried to murder him completely. Izuku nodded. If nothing else, that was something he needed to learn. There was no point in having the information he did if he couldn't relay it to his team, something that had cost him 2/3 of his class at least. The rest of the lesson carried on as usual after they thanked the big three for their time, and Izuku was scribbling in his notebook, trying to figure out the best way to articulate information. The first thing he got was positioning, and he could give direction by pointing and distance in the usual way, but what if people couldn't see, or needed direction and distance over radio? What if people used different systems? Luckily, he knew the direction intrinsically, and the distance was given to him in both meters and feet, and not in, say, vectors, because he wasn't far enough in calculus to do a lot of that math, and he highly doubted anyone in the hero business actually was either, with the state of most heroes nowadays. Math just wasn't needed as much unless you had a quirk that specifically required it. Maybe he should get a compass? Vitals and health information was easy enough to tell. That was pretty much verbatim to whatever the quirk gave him, indicating region, intensity, whatever, so that wasn't a problem. Mental state was a bit harder. Hell, it was hard to articulate his own mental state, so even if he could understand exactly what was going through a person's head, mood or otherwise, there was no way he'd be able to accurately tell people about it. There was something you had to just feel to understand. He ended up trailing behind at the end of the day, engrossed in his notebook, writing down different ideas. Sign language would be good anyway, in case of underground operations that required quiet. Hey, I thought I'd missed you. He looked up, startled. It was Togata. Oh, senpai, sorry, I didn't see you there. The boy grinned. I imagine not. You look pretty invested in that book. What are you writing about? He grimaced to himself. Well, he said slowly, I realized today that I'm not very good at telling people what my quirk tells me. I was trying to figure out the best way to do that, but it kind of just boils down to getting faster and using a common system that's easy to understand. Maybe some shorthand? Sign language for sure, in case it's spelled off. He trailed off, already drawn back into his train of thoughts, but he was shaking out of it again when the other boy chuckled. Sounds like a plan. You haven't had that quirk for very long, right? Izuku nodded, frowning. He grinned. Already got all these plans, though. That's super neat. I imagine you'll be unparalleled in information gathering. Other than Sir, maybe. But that's just because he's been in the game longer than you. Izuku looked up. Sir? As in Sir Night-Eye? Togata shot him 2 thumbs up. Yup, that's who I'm working under right now. He helped me a lot with my quirk, too. Say, you're looking for a work study, right? Izuku nodded, barely daring to breathe. I think Sir would like you. If you can get your teacher to approve, maybe I can introduce you. I know he just has me, so maybe he'd like a fresh provisional hero like you. Plus, he helped get you back, you know. He shook his head, dumbfounded and vibrating practically out of his skin. You'd really introduce me to the Sir Night-Eye? Togata clapped him on the shoulder. Sure, you're pretty quick on your feet, and you got a lot of heart. I'd love to work with you. Izuku hastily nodded and bowed, thanking the third year profusely before bounding right back the way he had come, hoping to catch Aizawa before he left for the day. He managed to find a man outside the teacher's lounge and practically pranced up to him, eyes no doubt shining and full of stars. The man merely sighed. What? Togata-senpai said he would introduce me to Sir Night for work study as long as you said it was okay. The tired teacher grimaced like he had tasted something foul, but searched Izuku's eyes for any shred of doubt, finding, of course, none. He ran a hand down his face and shifted the papers under his arm more securely to the crook of his armpit. Fine. If you don't like it, you have my number. He passed the confused boy a form, the work studies form, and turned to walk into the teacher's lounge, leaving Izuku out in the hallway alone. If he didn't like it, weird, but whatever. Mario scratched his head sheepishly. I mean, I could totally do that, All Might, but I kind of promised Midori I'd take him too, if that's alright. I'd love to do you the favor, but Uraraka's eyes lit up. Midori? Yeah, he'd be great there. Don't worry, senpai. If Sir only wants one in turn, Deku is definitely a great pick. Don't you worry about me. The skeletal All Might shifted, surprised. Ah, forgive me, young Mirio. I didn't know you already had someone in mind. No worries, of course. Mirio grinned. I can just text Sir about it, no problem. The office is pretty small, and it's always fun to work with friends. All Might looked relieved. Thank you. Sorry to spring this on you. No trouble. Sir would love to hear from you if you have time for a phone call or an email. He still collects all your merch, you know. Oh, he responded. He looked at his phone, reading over the word before smiling wide again. I can bring you both. He said that if they're both good, he can take both, no problem. No promises, of course. He winked at Uraraka. But I'm sure you'll be able to win him over. You both helped beat me, after all. The girl grinned back at him and pumped a fist in the air. He was right. Both were a great fit for the agency. Hopefully, Sir would like them too. Izuku fiddled with his costume case nervously. Why he had to bring it, he wasn't entirely sure, but Mario said it was a good idea, and to call him by his given name, which Izuku was still having trouble with except in his head, so he decided to trust his upperclassmen. Uraraka bounded up to him. Hey, Deku! Mirio-senpai running late? He nodded, frowning. How did you... She smacked her forehead. I completely forgot to tell you. He's bringing me, too. How neat would it be to do a work study together, huh? Make up for lost time? She elbowed his ribs with a grin, and he smiled softly back. Mario ran up, now not even out of breath, but looking sheepish. Sorry about that, Kohais. Nejire distracted me. Totally ready to go now. He led them to the train station, him and Uraraka chatting back and forth, with Izuku occasionally offering commentary, but content to listen to them. He was a little nervous. After all, Uraraka was probably more in line with the kind of hero Mirio was, so maybe Sir would like her better. Plus, there was the cryptic warning from Aizawa, and he couldn't imagine that the man would give him an unfounded warning. What if Night Eye didn't like him? What if he thought that Izuku was a villain, working with Sensei just to get a quirk? The League was still at large after all, even if, like Tomura said, they hadn't made the news since Kamino and were trying to be subtle and not commit major crimes. They got off after a few stops and came in front of a large, nondescript office building. It made sense, he supposed, that Night Eye, a borderline underground hero, wouldn't want to advertise the location of his agency to just anyone walking down the street. Mario greeted the receptionist, a person with a centipede mutation, and led them up the elevator outside the hero's office. He paused, looking at the two of them seriously, and they both tensed. If you want to get in, he intoned, the best way to do it is make Sir laugh. At that, he brightened considerably and knocked twice before opening the door, leading the two into a rather odd sight. I brought them, sir. Mirio didn't spare more than a glance at where the blue-skinned sidekick was tied up and crying laughing, and Izuku and Uraraka eyed each other. worried and confused. Ah, the hero pushed up his glasses, face blank. Excellent. Mirio, take Bubble Girl and wait outside. I will send one of them out to you in a moment to conduct the individual interviews. The woman, Bubble Girl, gasped for air as she let herself be led away, and Mirio shot them both a thumbs up, leaving them to look around the room. Izuku managed to suppress a flinch at the magnitude of All Might, forcing his gaze onto the green-haired hero who was staring at the two of them behind the reflection of his glasses getting hit with the light. Welcome to the Night Eye Agency, Midoriya Izuku or Uraraka Ochako. Which one of you would like to go first? Uraraka swallowed and they gave each other a glance before she stepped forward with a smile. I didn't plan it, but I'll start. Night Eye blinked at the space buns, and she smiled nervously. He nodded. Very well, Midoriya, please wait outside. Much like Mirio, he shot her a thumbs up and closed the door behind him, finding Mirio waiting all alone in some chairs outside the office. Ah, ladies first. Did either of you make him laugh yet? He shook his head. Uraraka tried 2 space buns I thought were decent, but he just nodded. Oh man, Mirio rubbed his jaw. Puns usually get him. He might be in a bad mood today, or maybe he's just being extra hard. Well, I believe in you both. Izuku smiled sheepishly. Thanks, senpai. Wouldn't want you to have me this trip for nothing. The blonde shrugged. Wouldn't have brought you if I didn't think you could do it. But even if he ends up not hiring either of you, this trip was definitely worth it. We got to hang out, which is fun. Hey, maybe we can go out for ice cream after this. Think Aizawa-sensei will mind? He chuckled, but cut himself off with a frown and turned to the door. That's odd. What's up? Uraraka is mad, like, really mad. So mad I don't have to actively search for it now that I'm thinking. Night Eye is too, but his is colder. They glanced at each other, and Izuku closed his eyes, breathing and focusing on the two people in the room across from him. Uraraka was angry, like he thought. It was almost indignant in nature. But Night Eye was annoyed and aloof. Had he said something insulting? Oh, now she was darting around the room and he was avoiding her? He opened his eyes in alarm. I think they're fighting, like physically fighting. Mario frowned, concerned. That's really weird. Angry and fighting? Doesn't really seem like Sir's style. I mean, I know he wanted an interview, but that seems a little... Izuku shut up from his seat, pacing. I don't know, do we intervene? Neither of them are hurt yet, but surely this can't be good, can it? Mario rubbed his chin. I say we let it play out up until the point someone gets hurt. Sir is a pro. He wouldn't be fighting without a reason, for sure. I mean, it's probably just a test of some kind. She recently got an upgrade for her sports festival performance, right? Maybe he's just testing to see how far she's come, like he did for me. Izuku sat down heavily, worrying his lips. If you say so. You know him better than me. After 3 tense minutes, her anger turned to exasperation, and Night Eye's annoyance turned to calm, like it had been before Izuku had left the room, now that he thought about it, and he relaxed minutely. They stopped, he muttered. Uraraka opened the door, face neutral, but she grinned almost wickedly when she saw Izuku and Mirio. Hey! Your turn, Midori! He nodded nervously. Hopefully, Night Eye didn't ask him to fight too. His knife was still in his costume case, and without it, he wasn't as effective at combat. He shut the door behind him and blinked at the state of the room. Night Eye was straightening up papers that had gone everywhere, and there were footprints on the walls and ceilings. Other than that, nothing looked broken, and Night Eye himself didn't have a scratch on him. So that, coupled with how Uraraka had come out of the room, thing must have been fine. Have a seat, Midoriya. He gulped and sat, gently setting his costume case on the floor as Sir Night-Eye sat across from him, hands steepled in front of his face and gaze critical. So you want a work study here? Why? Izuku nodded. You're one of the best information gatherers. You know how to gather data, summarize it, and give it to people in the most helpful manner. Something I desperately want to learn. Like me, you don't have a physical enhancement quirk, and you're almost underground in nature. Also, he rubbed his head sheepishly. I need experience desperately. Night Eye said nothing for a moment before he asked a question entirely out of left field. I heard you have a quirk now. He tensed and swallowed. Yeah, it's search. It used to be ragdolls before Sensei took it and gave it to me. He raised an eyebrow, nothing else moving. Sensei? All for one, he said hurriedly. I didn't hear the name until after Kamino, so... Night Eye blinked once, slowly. And why would the symbol of evil give you a quirk? He fidgeted. He wanted to? He wanted to. He nodded hesitantly. Yeah, I didn't want it, but... The man eyed him for a moment before nodding. What do you bring to this agency? Izuku blinked. I can find people? If I tag someone, I know the general area of where they are, even if I'm not close enough for specifics. I can also use it to get emotion? He raised an eyebrow. I was not aware Search had an empathy-based ability. It might, I guess. He rubbed his head. Because otherwise, I wouldn't be able to tell, right? I think it's tied to their mental state, which is why I can feel it. It's not like I can read their thoughts or anything, but similar to pain, it's something people feel, so I can feel it, I guess. That's how I knew. He trailed off, looking back at the hero before looking away. That's how I knew you and Uraraka were both hungry, for some reason. His eyes narrowed minutely. Elaborate? Izuku swallowed. Well, Uraraka's anger was indignant. Like she was upset about something. Maybe something she thought was unfair. You were more annoyed. Night Eye set his hands on the desk. And why do you think we became angry? Izuku really didn't want to say you antagonized her about something, but that was his gut feeling. Still not something you said to your potential employer, so he went with the next best thing. I don't know. Sir sat back in his chair, letting out an almost imperceptible sigh that had Izuku fidgeting in his seat. Oh God, he didn't like him, and now he wasn't going to have a work study. Give me your form and let your classmate back in. His eyes widened, and he hurried to comply, gently setting the form on the desk next to Uraraka's and slipping the door open. He wants us both back in. She smiled and bounded over, joining him and standing in front of the desk. Sir Night-Eye steepled his hands again, looking at them both. I have a few doubts about both of you. Uraraka stiffened beside him, and he felt her indignation come to the surface again. However, since Mirio has vouched for you, and you both seem to care a great deal, I will hire you both. If... He raised a finger, looking at them over the rim of his glasses. If you slack off in any way, I will not hesitate to fire you. Is that understood? Yes, sir. He nodded. I look forward to seeing you both on Saturday. They walked out, Izuku still shaking with nerves, and Uraraka was quick to tell Mirio they were both in. He high-fived them. How about that ice cream, eh? Izuku nodded dumbly. still staring off into space. He'd done it. He had a work study. And there we go. So this was chapter 15, which is I think the longest chapter to date, which is the first one to breach the 30 minutes. Um it was pretty hard to record it all in one shot, honestly. My computer kept crashing. This is the third take. Ugh, it was unbearable. Anyways, we are also more than halfway through, only 10 chapters left after this. So, anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you all in the next chapter, which unfortunately won't be tomorrow because it's my grandpa's birthday, so I'll be doing that instead. Anyways, have a good night. Bye.